And then I am going to pass it over to Alexandra Gressett, who will introduce Beverley Ingle, and who will introduce our speakers. So.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Thomas Balch Library, a history and genealogy library owned and operated by the town of Leesburg here in Virginia. If you are here in town, we welcome you to visit for research or to review our exhibits. We host a variety of lectures and classes, many of which may be found on the library YouTube channel. I am pleased today to welcome Beverley Ingle of Bespoke Books here in Leesburg, with whom we are co-hosting this event, and who will now introduce our guest speaker.
And the baton is in my hand. I am so excited and honored and privileged to introduce Beverley East, who is the beautiful and smart woman that you see in your screen, and the gorgeous green dress. She is just a phenomenal person. You're going to learn so much from her today. Her official bio is really impressive, aside from just, anecdotally, just a charming and amazing woman. Beverley is a certified court-qualified forensic document examiner who's practiced in the field for 33 years internationally. She has offices in Kingston, Jamaica, here in Washington, D.C., just down the road, and in London. She's testified before 42 judges in 6 countries and has lived to tell the tale. Ms. East consulted on an Emmy-nominated episode with the Smithsonian History Channel. She's participated in an FBI handwriting identification research study just a couple of years ago, 2020. She received the Trailblazer Award by Flory Roberts as the only woman of color worldwide qualified and practicing in both areas of handwriting expertise. Very impressive. In 2015, she received the Forerunner Award from the ICS, and she also sits on several professional boards where she was nominated vice president to the International Association of Document Examiners last year, 2021. She has a board certified study program as well on QDE and teaches short courses on handwriting analysis. Aside from all of this wonderful work, Beverley's also a published author. She's authored 3 books: Finding Mr. White, which is a new slant on selecting the perfect mate. Mr. Wright, not White, excuse me. Reaper of Souls, a novel on the 1957 Kindle crash in Jamaica, and Bat Mitzvah Girl, which is memories of a Jamaican child. She was named by Ebony Magazine in 2018 as one of the 6 Caribbean writers you should take some time to discover. Her 4th book, Whose Signature Is It Anyway? Complexities of Caribbean Fraud, will be released this year, 2022. You can learn all about her and find out more about her work at suspectsignatures.com and get ready for a wonderful presentation today. Beverley, thank you so much for being with us. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. Thank you, Beverley, for inviting me, finding me online, I should imagine. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be a part of this presentation. We want to celebrate National Handwriting Day on January 23rd. I want to begin with John Hancock's signature, because obviously this is the date of his birthday. I'm sorry, I'm just having some little technical issues here, sorry. So John Hancock's signature is on the Declaration of Independence. And although there are 56 other signatures evident on that document, it is his signature that is the most outstanding in terms of the flourish, the terminal strokes, the underscore, and the large initial J. The biggest misconception is that we as examiners look at just letter comparisons, but we do other features as well. We look at other features which are more important, such as connections, terminal strokes, abbreviations, and margin. The 4 principles to identify handwriting is not letter formation, but we look at movement and form as the two are intertwined. When you look at any handwriting, you'll see a rhythm within the writing. So the movement is, where does it start? Where does it finish? And the form is obviously the letter, which is the second aspect of it. But movement and form are subconsciously written and intertwined with each other like a dance. Then we look at spacing, the margins, the spacing between letters, the spacing between words. And finally, we look at line quality, and line quality are the features that we see within the stroke of the handwriting. So for instance, if something is written, a handwriting sample is in ink by fountain pen, you will see certain characteristics under magnification, which helps with us identifying whether the same person may have written another sample based on the features that we see in the line quality. If it's written with a ballpoint pen or these gel pens, felt tip pen, all these features are what we call line quality. So I want to begin, the Thomas Balch Library provided me with 3 different samples. So I'm going to begin with the first one, exploring the Mott Bentley correspondence. In 2016, Thomas Balch Library received a collection of more than 500 letters to and from Dr. Armstead Randolph Mott, his wife Virginia Bentley Mott, and their friends and family members. Arriving still in their envelopes and bundled into a 19th century document trunk, the letters range in a date between 1830 and 1900 and include detailed descriptions of life in Loudoun County before and during the Civil War. Motts lived at Roadway and sent and received letters to a network of correspondence that extended throughout Loudoun County, across Virginia and beyond. Donated by Allen Haywood Jr. of Glen Allen, Virginia, the letters have remained with the descendants of the Motts and represent an untapped source of valuable information. Many of the letters were separated, missing signatures, or were challenging to read. The library staff carefully researched and arranged the collection, but some mysteries remain. So the first sample I was asked to look at was a ledger found in the Ethel Littlejohn Adams collection, written by Dr. Armstead Mott, or by his wife, Virginia Bentley Mott. At first glance, the handwriting appeared similar to Mrs. Mott's writing. Information in the Ethel Littlejohn Adams collection ledgers relate extensive details about Mott's pharmacy and practice, and also include information relevant to the infamous Loudoun trial of Emily Lloyd for multiple murders in 1872. So here is the ledger, beautifully written, well spaced, and so all these things are really important when you're examining any document. So author A is Armstead Mott, the doctor himself, and author B is Virginia Mott, Bentley Mott, his wife. I will put all 3 together, and after examining author A and B, I decided from examination that author B could not be the writer. There were several aspects of it that disqualified the identity. So one of the first things was where you see the blue, these are the T-bars that cross right across the entire word. You do not see that in the ledger. You see disconnected T-bars. But apart from the T-bars, there is no spacing. So what I said earlier about looking at spacing, this handwriting is too crowded. Whereas this handwriting, although it's smaller, is more organized, and the T-bars disconnect. The most telling part of the comparison for me was the number 3. This is the number 3 here. I think it's $3. But I could find these 3s in the handwritten letter that I just showed you. And it has this little curl on the top of the 3. So here is the 3. And if you look at the 2 is like a swan's neck, and you could find the same 2 in both. I always start with numbers because numbers don't lie. Sometimes people can change a lot of other aspects of their handwriting, but numbers very rarely change. And then here is one letter. So you're looking at the form. Where does it start? It starts at the top, it comes around, and then there's a heavy pressure at the last stem of the A. So we look at this A, it starts at the top, it comes around, and the heavy pressure is in the last part of the A. So that's what we're calling, identifying it as the line quality. Then continuing on other aspects of the letter, here are the T-bars that don't connect. They disconnect here, they disconnect over here on the ledger, here on the ledger, here on the ledger, the disconnection of the T-bar. And then also the A again, the open A and the structure of the A can be found above there. Then I'm looking at the letter formation, the movement of the letter M, which has more humps in it than the standard M, which I can also find in the ledger here. Also, the formation of the lower part of the letter F, here, where it's got of 1850, the way it's formed, it starts with no upper loop, comes down and moves across. The same movement and formation of those letters, F, are found also in the letter. And also in the word rapid and Robert Williams and Richmond. And finally, here at the bottom where the square is, you see the word Sally, which is really a Y, and most Ys come in a left motion, but in this handwriting, the Y continues into the next word in a right motion. And you can find that in a Y, not just one Y, I'm just using one Y, but in several Ys in the sample of handwriting. So that was my first question answered, that the doctor had written the ledger. So question 2, many letters in the Bentley correspondence had been removed from their envelopes where missing pages or were unsigned and undated. The processing archivist painstakingly worked to identify correspondence. Many letters were only signed with the nickname Soda. We think we've figured out the identity. When we say we, the library. Can handwriting analysis help? Yes, we can. We have 2 candidates with similar handwriting, Mary Martin or Anne Snowden. So here is the letter that I'm going to compare with 2 other samples. So it starts off, dear, my dear Armstead. And so here we have Mary Martin's handwriting, and I've put it side by side. I am actually looking at everything in magnification, sometimes 250 times bigger. I know you're just seeing it on a screen, but you have to trust that what I'm showing you is under bigger magnification when I'm doing my examination. So the first thing that I identified was in handwriting, there are 3 zones, upper zone, lower zone, and the middle zone. And in the Mary Martin handwriting, the upper zone is way much higher than those in this blue handwriting. Also, my dear, first 2 words, there is no similarity in formation, movement, spacing. In the dear, all the letters are connected in dear, and in the dear in the Mary Martin handwriting, they are all disconnected. Also, once again, looking at spacing, the handwriting takes up the entire form of the page, whereas on this one, there is a margin on the left-hand side of the page. And the writing starts way down beyond the top of the page. So as I said, why I ruled out the sample was higher upper zones, spacing and connections were different, the letter M and the word dear inconsistent, and the margin alignment inconsistent. Now, when we put the Anna Snowden handwriting closer, there are more similarities that can be found in this handwriting when compared with the letter. So here are some of them. The first thing I noticed was in the writing, no matter how the sentence was well crafted, the ampersand was in the middle rather than right and the ampersand, the sign, was stuck in the middle of the sentence. I could find the same ampersand in the body of the writing as well. And then looking at the terminal stroke, which is the last letter coming downwards in the letter Y, could also find that same formation in several. I'm only doing ones because I find once I start dotting the whole page, it gets a little confusing. And then also the same word, quiet. Quiet, it's quiet here and quiet here. So, but you've got the same formation, the Q connecting to the U, the T bar having double stem, and the dot on the I's, also found in the same. Then continued more, obviously the more you find, the stronger your argument can be. And when I go to court, that's very important as an expert witness to be able to argue my point and show definitively how I've arrived at my opinion, not just saying, oh, this is the same and that's it. I can argue my point for its fullest. So here are some more. So once again, looking at the terminal stroke, it finishes in an upward movement, that word, the letter D. And when you're looking at the letter D here, it finishes in an upward movement. So those are the ones in pink and red here. The D again in an upward motion. Then if we look at the letter P, it starts with an initial stroke and then a stem. You can find that initial stroke and the stem coming down in the P, and that's number 2. So when we're looking at number 3, it is the connection of the O towards the F going upwards into the next letter. Then we look at number 4, the word it. The same thing, you have a small I with an I dot. And I dots are very important. They're almost very individualistic how people do I dots. They're either dots, they're dashes, and they come in all different forms. So here you have the same formation, movement and form here, and you have the same formation here. And then number 5, what I'm showing you here is the connection. You have a T stem, which is smaller than the H, the letter H, which continues up in an upward motion, comes back down, and the T bar crossing between both of them. And you can find that here in the sample. So question 3. So yes, my conclusion would be yes, this was the handwriting sample that I matched with this one. Question 3. What can you do with difficult to read handwriting? One of Virginia Bentley's Mott correspondents, Lizzie Lagar, wrote excellent chatty letters full of gossip and information, but she often cross-writes her letters, making them hard to decipher. In cross-written letters, the writer writes a letter as usual, then turns the paper and writes across the page in that direction on the top of the existing text. Why would they do this? Any number of reasons, but it is difficult to read. Any suggestions that may help the writing that is difficult to read? So here is the writing, which I've never seen anything like this before. It looks like basket weaving. However, if I was asked to give some indication of how you could do this. So all I've done is turned it into another color. So if I had to transcribe this letter or handwriting sample, I've turned it into one color and I would read it from top to bottom, ignoring what's underneath. Then I would turn it on its side and then put it in another color and then read the other part. I was asked earlier, what did I think? And I think this is someone who has a lot of time on their hands and not knowing, as I was told by this person wrote excellent chatty letters full of gossip and information. And I just always feel that gossip is the idle tongue of people. So that is my presentation on what was given. I'm open to answer any questions that may arise from this or curious about anything about handwriting analysis. And as Beverley kindly mentioned my book earlier, it will be out hopefully by the end of next month. Whose signature is it anyway? Complexities of Caribbean Fraud. And I have worked in the Caribbean. I am from Caribbean descent, proud Jamaican. And moving to Jamaica to research a book, I realized there wasn't an expert on the island. And then I started getting flooded with, it wasn't the plan to go to Jamaica and set up an office, but there wasn't anybody on the island that could do the work that I started doing. But what I found in doing that work, there was a lot of things that I didn't know and had to figure out how to do it because it was different. Caribbean fraud is different from the rest of the world. I always say, best of who we are, we have Usain Bolt, and the worst of who we are, we have fraud to no end. So I'm open to any questions. Thank you for your participation today. And I'd like to thank my hosts, Beverley, and the staff from the library who have all been extremely helpful in helping me with this presentation. And if you're too shy to ask any questions today or something pops into your head, 2 days from now, you can always drop me an email or contact the library, and I'll hand it back over to my hosts.
So thank you very much, Beverley, for a very interesting presentation. And I particularly appreciate the added information about the Mott collection. It's really helpful to us. I find that one of the things that stump a lot of people working with archival collections is working with different handwritings. And we were lucky enough with that collection to have a big variety of letters from different individuals to work with, but there were still a lot of challenges and mysteries, and we're helpful. Your advice is very helpful. The cross-writing advice actually is a great idea with the color that I had not thought of. So thank you very much. So we're looking for a few questions more. So if you have questions out there, please continue to enter them, but I'll go ahead and read a few. So the first question comes from Casey, and she says, first, thank you so much. Are there hints into people's motivations in their writing styles, and are certain movements or styles common?
Could you repeat the first part of the sentence, please?
So her first sentence is, are there hints into people's motivations in their writing styles?
Are there hints?
Yeah, so I'm guessing she's asking, and Casey, please send clarification if I'm wrong. I'm guessing she's asking, can you tell sort of what people's motivations are from the style of their writing? Like if they're being disingenuous or trying to disguise their writing, or if they're angry, maybe.
It's a two-part question, a two-part answer. So if you're looking for emotions in handwriting, then that's graphology. So if somebody is angry or stressed out, you can tell it in the handwriting because the pressure is so thicker and heavier in the handwriting. So the only time I've really focused on that is if I've been working on kidnapping cases where handwritten notes have been left. And I really don't like working on kidnapping cases because I get too emotional and you're supposed to be non-biased. So as a mother, I just don't do that work anymore. But in the early days, you start with what you get. So yes, you can tell the emotions in handwriting. If handwriting is disguised now, you would have to have some other template to identify whether it has been disguised. So you would have to start with something else. And then this person is saying, no, 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 this is not me. They may have sent out a prank note or something else to somebody and tried to disguise it. But then when you put the two together, those habitual writing patterns still remain in disguised writing. And I just worked on a case recently where a woman disguised her handwriting and blamed somebody of doing something. And now she's trying to backtrack and say it's not her handwriting, but it's all too late now. Someone's been murdered and it's turned into something much worse than she ever imagined. And I had to be able to show that it was her handwriting. It was her handwriting.
Wow, that sounds interesting. And somebody, Casey writes, apparently she didn't realize you were on the case.
Now, when people are doing stupid things, they don't think of Beverley East.
They should though.
No, but they don't,
That's
when
a
they're doing
huge
it in the
mistake.
moment. No, in the moment when they're doing it, I'm going to get that person or I'm going to do this. They're not thinking that they're going to get caught. They think that they are smarter than everybody else.
Don't we all though?
Yeah, that's fine. It's good to be that way, but just be kind when you're sending something out. Don't send something anonymous. I'm kind to somebody, and then they end up getting murdered, and then you're trying to backtrack for everything that you said and did. Just don't be in that space at all.
Good advice, general. So a really good question that sort of the letters that we looked at earlier might address is, does the type of writing instrument affect the ability to analyze handwriting? For example, a ballpoint pen versus pencil versus fountain pen. I know we sent you some documents that were probably all written with a fountain pen or something similar. Probably, I think.
Unless we're working from the original, I can honestly say felt tip pen is our worst nightmare, because felt tip pens, they hide all the features that you would normally see in a ballpoint pen or a fountain pen or a gel ink pen. So what happens with the felt tip pen, it has a cushion. So once you press on it onto the paper, it bleeds into the paper, although you can't see it as the person who's writing it. When we're looking at it under magnification, it bleeds into the paper, and then all the features that you want to be looking for, you can't find. You can't see the pressure so clearly. You can't see the movement of where that letter starts and finishes. So felt tip pen on the original, and worse still, if you get it as a copy, it's even worse. But everything else, I love ballpoint pens because they always leave little blobs of ink somewhere, and those blobs of ink really help to tell a story.
Yeah, I think your opinions about felt tip pens are very similar to a lot of archivists' opinions about felt tip pens or
Oh,
pencil.
great.
Pencil it can be the worst because it
Yeah.
smears and it's hard to read. And we have some really great questions. One that came in that is, I think, of interest to a lot of people who are maybe left-handed is, in analyzing writing, what elements do you look for to determine handedness, right or left, or is that something that you consider?
Handedness has no relevance to what we do because handwriting is a brain function. So if you didn't have hands and you wrote with your feet or your mouth, we would still be able to analyze you. So I never consider whether the person is left-handed or right-handed. I do just personally, if I see somebody writing and they're left-handed, I'm actually quite excited because research has shown that left-handed people are more intelligent than right-handed people. So that's the research, not what I'm saying. That's the research out there. So anytime I see somebody with left-handedness, I'm not left-handed, but I have lived and known a lot of people who are left-handed, and they're very, very smart people beyond the research. So no, so it's handwriting is a brain function. So I've analyzed people who are limbless. I've analyzed people who have written with their mouths, written with their feet. I had a study once where a group of children were limbless and they were all writing with their feet. And we were brought in to help the parents and the psychologists on how best to implement what they were learning and what was coming from their brain to help them move forward and not focus on the lack of arms. You know, so yeah, it doesn't matter if somebody is left or right.
Interesting. Okay. And
Somebody
I,
asked
sorry.
somebody asked me yesterday, because I did another interview yesterday for National Handwriting in London, and somebody asked me yesterday, what does handwriting say about you? And it's easier to tell you what it doesn't say. So handwriting doesn't say, research has shown, doesn't say your age, your race, or your gender. So think of everything else. I always say you're naked on paper. Once you write something and someone analyzes you, you're naked on paper. Because it tells everything else.
Interesting. That is interesting. Because I would think the gender part particularly would not be true, but I could see where I think we impress a lot of ideas about gender onto handwriting in some cases. Like you see something and say that's very feminine handwriting, and that it isn't necessarily a woman's handwriting. So that's good to keep in mind.
And also with all this new movement of transgender and gay people, and there is so much change that when you're looking at handwriting, it's not really that important what the gender is. It's more important what that person offers. What is in their characteristics, in their personality that they bring to the table. And that's why handwriting has been used a lot as selection process, because it moves away all the bias. So if somebody comes to you and they are transgender, you might already have your biases. But if you see them on paper and they're like, oh yeah, you tick all the boxes, they can do this job, then you find out they're transgender. And it doesn't matter because they've checked all the boxes that you want in terms of the position that you're hiring them for.
Interesting. So one question that we got that kind of follows on the question of what you can and cannot tell is from handwriting. Can handwriting indicate or provide clues about where and when a writer learned the skill?
Yeah. I laugh because sometimes when you're looking at forged documents and somebody else has added something to the document, you can tell that that person is younger than the actual person who wrote the original document. So the time frame in which I remember working on a case and the person was 10 years younger than the person who had written the original document. And I was able to tell the judge the person was 10 years younger because the format and the writing style was not of the time of the person who wrote, if you get what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I've learned in the Caribbean is that because most of the Caribbean islands were under British rule, the British had a different system than the American system. So sometimes when I'm analyzing handwriting and I can see where somebody has added something, but if the person is of, say, Jamaican, for instance, and they're of a certain age, they would have only learned a certain style of handwriting, which would be the British system. And then somebody comes along and tries to change something within the writing, but they've now, you're much younger and they're learning the American style. So they don't think that that there's a difference, but there is a specific difference in how letters are formed and how things are written, even sometimes the date. In the Caribbean, under the British rule, we write the day first, the month, and the year. In the American system, you write the month first, the day, and then the year. So sometimes just little things like that, when they're filling in forms, they make those little mistakes, which help us a great deal.
The mistakes seem to make you happy.
Yeah, mistakes. Yeah, because they're not thinking about those things. I mean, and even someone says, well, you shouldn't go do these interviews and say all these things because now people will change. And I'm like, no, because they won't remember. They will go into their natural form. Maybe they'll start off, oh, Miss E said this, so I'm going to do the opposite. But I always start on page 3. I never start at the beginning. I start at the end because by the end they forget. They're comfortable with whatever they're writing and then they forget.
So kind of following on that idea, we've had several people who asked about whether the fact that many people tend to print everything but their signature, and I know in some cases also their signature instead of writing in cursive, does that affect what you look for? Has it made it more difficult? Which is easier to kind of, does it matter?
It doesn't matter. Cursive is always easier because you've got more to work with. Print, but then we look at different things. We look at the positioning of letters, what we call the base, the imaginary line. Does it sit on this imaginary line? So when you're printing, or even anything, if you're writing cursive, you're still using an imaginary line. But when you're printing, we look at the position. Where does it sit on that paper? And is it consistent with, because usually people who print, even if it's disguised or they're just printing, they're trying to be clear about what they're saying on that paper. But there's still little secrets, which I'm not going to say what they are, that show you, helps us to identify something if we're looking for it, if it's printed.
Okay. Now I just really want to know what the secrets are. I appreciate you keeping them secret. It's good. Kind of coming off that idea, we've had a question. How do you go about studying handwriting and building expertise? And I'm actually very curious because you mentioned, for instance, in the Caribbean, the different styles over time. Do you look at examples of handwriting across time? Are there resources that you go to? I mean, I imagine your book that's forthcoming will be really helpful to a lot of people in that way.
Thank you. Before my book, there were other reference books that give you all the different templates of countries around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of the question is, how do you study? I think it's very tedious. It's like a language. So it's very tedious, the beginning and the studying of it. But once you get into it, it's like you don't want to let it go. You want to learn more. You want to learn more. It's like if you're working in a garden and then you plow away, and then you see something sprouting up through the earth. I think it's the same kind of, well, for me, it was the same kind of feeling. So I would suggest to anybody who's interested that they just do just a simple one-day course or half-a-day course to see if it's something that they want to do. And then you take it further and you sign up for a 2-year course. Then you do your 2-year course. Then you do your certification. And then you are a certified handwriting expert. You're not actually an expert because you don't have any years behind your certificate. So I always suggest that people do an apprenticeship with somebody who is an expert and build up your years behind them. And then you go out in the world and get knocked down a few times when you go to court and the other side tries to make you look like you don't know what you're talking about, but that's their job. So yeah, it's a process, and I would say anybody, if it's a second career and you've got time on your hands, there's so many books out there to read to help you on your journey, and it's a great journey, and it's profitable.
Excellent. Just so people don't think it's always easy, one question we received that would be interesting to me to hear is, what is the most difficult project you've worked on and why?
Oh, most difficult project I've worked on. I'm going to give you two. One, because one was very emotional. One, I worked on 6,000 documents, over 6,000 documents, 14 months. It was a money laundering case and 7 people were involved. And that took over my life for about 14 months. And the day the judge was making the judgment, my heart was ticking so fast, I thought I was going to pass out. Because I thought, if these men walk free, God help us all. Because I just thought we were doomed if she didn't see fit to find them guilty. So that was a difficult case, and I was in witness protection program, and it was just, yeah, it was stressful. And the other case I worked on when I nearly quit from my career was, I worked on a case where a young boy had been murdered, and the judge didn't believe my expertise that the handwriting was of the person who murdered him. And so those people walked away free. And that was emotional for me because the young boy that was murdered was the same age as my son, like days apart. And so, and although you're not supposed, I wasn't biased when I made my opinion, but when I was in the courtroom and there was all this politics going on around, I could tell that the judge was going to have more lenience for the other expert and not for me. So yeah, so those two. So when that judgment came, I cried for 3 days, and I don't cry easily, but I cried for 3 days, and I was ready to quit. And then I went quiet for a while and then surfaced again. So those are the two hardest cases I've had.
That sounds difficult. It's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
To me, it's the not glamorous side, what you see on CSI and all that. It's the not glamorous side of the work that we do.
Every profession has a not glamorous side.
Yeah. So that is the side that is, and I do take on cases sometimes. Well, I take on cases and I try not to know all the story. And that is the problem with me, because I don't want to know the story, because I just want to look at the documents and not have any bias. But sometimes it's good to know the story, because then you know you're in danger. You know how much danger you're stepping into, because one of the cases I worked on, I didn't realize how much danger I was in until I went to court and there were snipers on the roof The lawyer told me to go up in the library and not speak to anybody, and there was security up there. I didn't realize how much danger I was in until the day of courts, and I didn't know the full story, but this was drug dealers and gangsters and murderers and all this kind of stuff. I was just looking at the handwriting, that's all I was doing. But it was a big picture, much bigger than I'd ever imagined.
It's never a good sign when there's snipers on there.
Never a good sign. I got up into the library and I actually asked the librarian for some paper and said to her, if I don't come out of this courtroom today, can you pass this letter on to my assistant? And I left her a note to pass on to my son, because I really didn't think that was I thought that day was going to be my last day.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it's only happened once in my entire career, but it was a day that I just thought, well, maybe I should know a little bit more about the story.
Yeah.
Maybe I should
It's forearmed, right?
Yes, maybe I should just know a little bit more about the story.
Yeah, goodness. Okay, we have two more questions if you have time. One is really excellent and relevant to sort of what we've been talking about today with the examples. What tips do you have for a genealogist or family historian who is studying and transcribing historic documents? Are any of the tools you use that you would think would be particularly helpful?
I think this is just common sense. These are no technical tools. This is just common sense. Start with what you know. Wherever you start, it will be a branch that will lead you to something else. This is genealogy. And having written a book about my family, it's like I found one little nugget. And then once you find that little nugget, you go to something else, and then you find something else, and you just keep on and give yourself time. Whatever you're looking for, you're not going to find it in 24 hours, especially if it's a longer period of time. So those are the two things. Obviously, document everything, because when you try to find it again, you won't. So wherever you found it the first time, document where you found it. That's a mistake I made when I was writing my book about my family, that sometimes I would just take notes down, and then when I was going back to check, where did I get that information from? So always document where you got that information. Where was the source? And especially if you're looking a lot online, because everything online changes around so much. You might not find it in the same if you've not documented where the source was.
It's always great advice.
And one more thing, from a handwriting perspective, if you're having trouble reading what you're looking at, magnify it, enlarge it, take it to the copier, get it bigger. Just magnify it. It hurts your eyes after a little while looking at small handwriting. So just always magnify it.
Yeah, it's always interesting the details that you'll notice when it's larger.
When it's larger, yes.
Excellent advice. Thank you.
Take care of the paper that you have. If it's originals, like I'm sure in the library, all of those letters are originals. So they're in, I'm assuming they're in the proper boxes that keep them. Yeah, because somebody came here and there's like, you need proper boxes to keep your documents in. Because when I was researching things about my family history, somebody gave me a whole box of things. He says, I wanted you to have it before I die, because I wrote a book about my family dying in a train crash. And so this priest was there the night of the crash, and he had collected everything over the years. And then when he met me, he says, well, I'm going to die one day and it's going to get thrown out. So he handed it over to me. And then I showed it to a librarian and she says, oh, you need certain boxes and you need certain to keep the paper. So they're still here. They're still here. And I got to hand it over to somebody too. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing collection resource too. So yeah.
Yeah,
And-
they're actually thinking of building a museum, so in Jamaica, of this train crash. So if that ever gets off the ground, I would just hand the box over to them.
Excellent. So final question that was asked is, what sparked your interest to pursue this profession? Was it your research into the family history and the train crash, or did it predate that?
Predated. I Let me see, 1980s, when you have to think that far back. Yeah, I had a job that I hated in London, and then I decided to just take some time off and figure out what I was going to do the rest of my life. And I applied for a job, and the job said, send a handwritten cover letter with the resume. And so I just sent the handwritten cover letter in my best terrible handwriting. And I was accepted for the job. 611 people, they said, applied. And I was one of 10 people chosen. And I was chosen on my handwriting, not anything else that I had. And when I got in the job, we were all like Stepford wives. It was odd. It was very odd. We were all like Stepford wives. We laughed at the same jokes. We had the same high personality, very competitive. And I asked her, what did she do to us? Did she put something in the tea? You know, what was it? And she says, oh, she had us analyzed. And I'm like, how? She said, handwriting. I was like, oh dear, because my handwriting is terrible. Then I left it for a couple of days, and then I asked if I could see the report that was written about me. Read the report, everything about me was spot on, as if they'd spoken to my mom. And then I wanted to meet the person who had written this. So then she was in Paris giving a lecture, and I thought, that's where I want to be, in Paris giving a lecture. And so anyway, she came back, and this wonderful Scottish lady, and I met with her, sat down, talked with her, asked her a million questions, and then every day I kept calling her out, what if, and how about, and what if, and how, and I just drove her crazy. And she says, why don't you study it? And I'm like, I can study this? She says, yeah. And so that was the beginning. So I started studying graphology. And then I got married to a lawyer, and he bought one day. So I studied and got my certification. Then I was doing my master's. And I said to her, oh, I want to do this full time. I want to be a consultant like you. So she says, you have to do your master's. So I did my master's, and then I got married, and my husband brought me this document that had been forged, and I says, oh, darling, that's not what I do. You know, like trying to teach him, you know, like, this is a whole nother area of handwriting. He says, well, you cannot live in the Mecca of lawyers and not know anything about forgery. So go study some more. So I thank him every day. Because I went to New York and studied with this amazing man, Felix Klein, who was at the time like one of the forefathers, the founding fathers of document examination. He had worked with Osborne, who was the expert, one of the experts that worked on the case of the Charles Lindbergh cases. You know, I was working with like this amazing man. He was 87 and had me in his office every day at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, so I studied with him and became a document examiner. And as I say, the rest is history. And I've never looked back.
Oh, wow. That's really intriguing about
Because I didn't wake up one day and decide, oh, I want to be, you know, like you see something on CSI, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. It's like I fell into it and just embraced it. And I told my mom that I was quitting my full-time job to become a handwriting expert. All she kept on saying, technology, how are you going to compete with technology? You know, how are you going to compete with technology? And I'm like, how is that going to pay your mortgage? And I was 10 years in before my mom actually really told anybody that I had a job. She just kept telling people, oh, she's married to a lawyer. It just was like embarrassed. I says, I'm not a straight mom. I do have my own career. She says, yeah, but I can't explain it to people. So I was almost 10 years into my career before my mom actually told somebody I was a handwriting expert.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
exactly. And it was the time just after 9/11 when the anthrax letters came about. I was asked to look at the anthrax letters, and that gave me credibility. That gave me, in my mother's eyes, credibility, because she called me in the middle of something, and I said, I can't talk to you now. I'm working on the case. If you look on the news, you will see the anthrax letters. I've got them, and I'm working on that case. And she goes, ooh, ooh. So then, I was somebody.
Big headlines. So
Yeah, she finally, it finally clicked. And then when my books came out, it was easier. She could tell everybody I was an author because they could understand that.
less description, less explaining. I understand that.
Let's explain it.
Well,
But I still get people. I remember back in the day, I used to advertise in the Yellow Pages. Those days when you got a book and you flip through, and I would get a lot of calls for like Madam Layla kind of work, And I'm like, I just took the ad out because I was spending more time telling people that's not what I do. I don't do parties. I don't do parties, and I don't do one-on-one sessions with people. And so I just had to pull the ads out because I was just not getting the work that represented what I did. It's the internet because anything you do now can be found on the internet. So it's when people contact me, they already know what I can and cannot do. And they've already decided that they need somebody.
which is great. That saves you a lot of explanation.
Saves me. So this is what I was telling my mom, how technology has really helped me, because a man in Pakistan can go on the website and find me and use my services. And whereas before, I was limited to paper in the Yellow Pages in one country, but now globally I can work from anywhere. And even the pandemic has helped me because I don't have to travel so much now. I can testify on Zoom. Although I was looking forward to coming to Leesburg.
We're very happy that you were able to join us virtually, even though the weather today was not so bad. So it wouldn't have been as bad as difficult as it could have been.
No,
and the snowstorm actually happened that they predicted.
I had a friend who was willing to drive me there and wait and come back with me. So I had it all in place. And then I told him he was free and didn't have to drive me to Leesburg.
I hope you're able to visit us sometime soon. We'd love to have you visit the library and Leesburg and see us in person.
I tell you what I'm very interested in, this murder case that you mentioned in one of the samples there. If you have anything on that murder case that is related to handwriting. I'm not trying to serve the murder case, but I would just be interested to know what documents were related to that murder case. If you're
Between our collections and our colleagues at the Historic Court Records, there are probably some things that would be of interest to you. I can gather some things and maybe send them to you if you're interested.
Yes, because as I said, I don't know the full story. I'm just looking at the samples. But then when I read what you had written to me, the context of the documents, it was like, oh, there is a murder case here. I've done a few murder cases. Maybe I can, compare 18th century hand.
A road trip to Leesburg. I'll come pick you up, Beverly, and we'll dive into a murder case together.
There's a whole nother program here. So.
Exactly.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's just my curiosity just always takes me, somewhere else. It's like, what if so and so? What if so and so? I mean, I do that with everybody anyway. If you're telling me a story, I can interpret that whole story a different way. So if you've told me that you've moved to Canada, it's not why have you moved to Canada. I've got a whole nother story I can tell you about your trip to Canada. Which has nothing to do with handwriting. I'm just listening to the reasons you're telling me, and then I'm telling you how I interpret what you're telling me.
Okay.
So don't move to Canada.
It's a little cold for my taste, but
Yeah.
nice otherwise. Wonderful. Well, I guess we're about at our time. So do you have anything else you'd like to add before we go?
I would just like to thank you both. You both have been amazing in the last few days, helping me put the presentation together and providing what I need. So thank you, Beverly, for finding me. I'm not sure how you found me, but I'm assuming on the internet somewhere. And for those who have listened today, just thank you for your time. I know we are living in very precarious times, and I'm hoping this hour that I've shared with you or you shared with me has been interesting enough to speak more about handwriting and to celebrate on Sunday, National Handwriting Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. We received many nice comments in the Q&A and the chat that I will forward to you via email. And probably you'll hear from a few people with questions also.
I answer everything.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your time. This has been incredibly interesting, and I hope we can talk with you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm gonna.
Thank you, Beverly.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly, very much for co-hosting this program with us and for bringing Miss East.
Absolutely a pleasure of mine.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. So,